So today I'm going to be discussing pH or potential hydrogen. Okay, it stands for potential hydrogen. Excuse my sloppy writing. I have a hard time writing with the stylus. Um, you need to know that hydrogen is acidic in nature. Okay, it's a bunch of molecules that are acidic that tend to push the pH down. pH can be as high as 14, as low as 1, and anywhere in between. Okay, the higher the pH goes, the more basic it becomes, or the more alkaline. And the lower the pH goes, the more acidic or acidotic it becomes. And so it's important for you guys to be able to distinguish that. Base stands for bicarb. So just remember the word B for bicarb. It's the same thing for basic. And so I'm going to be referring to as bicarb or alkaline as base, as a lot of people do. So when you first have to set your foundation. Your pH is 7.35 to 7.45, and that's neutral, which is for our body. It's neutral for our body, meaning it's where it's supposed to be. So technically, it's slightly alkaline because the midpoint between 14 and 1 is 7. So our body's pH is supposed to be slightly alkaline. Then we have our CO2. You got to remember that our CO2 is controlled by our lungs. Okay. And carbon dioxide molecules, what they love to do is they love to release hydrogen into the bloodstream. And that's why CO2 represents acid. And you just bring down the 35 and the 45 to remember their therapeutic values. Then you have HCO3. HCO3 is represented by the kidneys. Okay. And its therapeutic value is 22 to 26, the best years of our lives. Okay. So you have to establish this basic foundation first before you start interpreting the ABGs. It's important that we memorize them and we understand that CO2 is controlled by lungs, and it essentially is parallel to acid. And then HCO3 is controlled by the kidneys. And you should also remember that hydrogen is also controlled by the kidneys. And that's how we can develop metabolic acidosis when we develop kidney failure, because your body cannot excrete hydrogen, which is highly acidic. So memorize these values, and then we can start interpreting some of these ABGs. So we discuss, let's say we have a value, and our value says that our pH is 7.21. Our CO2 is 56, and our HCO3 is 26. Okay. The first thing we have to find out is what the hell is going on with the pH? Is it high or low? Remember, the higher the pH goes, above 7.45, it's alkalosis. If it's less than 7.35, it's acidosis. So we have determined that our pH is acidosis. The second thing we do is we want to find out which of these two matches the acidic condition. Remember, CO2 represents acid, controlled by the lungs. HCO3 represents base, controlled by the kidneys. So we want to find out which of those two is correlating with the increased acid or the decreased pH. And so it's going to be this one. Okay, normal is 35 to 45. We have more than 45. We know that we have more CO2, which is acid, and that's the one that's going to represent it's going to be matching the low pH. And we know that CO2 is controlled by your lungs. So in turn, we determine that this condition represents respiratory acidosis. And remember, the HCO3 is normal, so that's why it's respiratory acidosis. But let's talk about a couple of other examples. Let's say our pH is 7.61. Let's say our CO2 is 50. And let's say our HCO3 is 36. In this particular case, you have both CO2 and HCO3 that are abnormal, which become a little bit more difficult for students to interpret. But let's go back to the basics. What's our pH? Our pH is high, so we know this is alkalosis. The second thing we want to find out is which of these two, either this one or this one, which one matches this abnormal pH. A high pH means a lot of base, a lot of alkalosis. And the one that represents alkaline is the HCO3, and it is higher than normal. It's 10 points higher than normal, while CO2 is only 5 points higher than normal. So let me write that down for you guys. 22 to 26 is the normal base, HCO3. This is 36. That's 10 points above normal. But 50 is only 5 points above normal. So because of that, we understand that the HCO3, the kidneys, are responsible for this abnormality of pH. So we determine this to be metabolic alkalosis. But we're not done yet, because in this particular scenario, your CO2 is also elevated. That means that they're trying to compensate. Your CO2 represents acid. It understands that there's too much of this one, of bicarb. So the CO2 is retaining its acid so it can help balance out the pH and compensate. But since the pH is still abnormal, we know that it's not fully compensated. So this is partially compensated metabolic alkalosis. I hope that makes sense, guys.